Thank you. That was a very long introduction. Sorry.
It's a good one. It's great.
Yeah, yep. I did all those things. Great. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to share the stage with such amazing people and to celebrate the end of the school year with you all. As Kelly mentioned, I am an MFA candidate in graphic design at RISD. I just sent my thesis book to print last week, and this is my first time presenting this work publicly, so I'm a little nervous, and also you get this preview before I actually present it at RISD. The title of this talk and my thesis is Making Common. I arrived at this title by taking a closer look at the origins of the word communication. Communication evolved from the Latin communis, which means common, communality, or sharing, and from the verb comunicare, I don't know if there's any Latin speakers in the room, but which means to make something common. As a designer, this stuck with me because it allowed me to take a look at my practice a little bit differently. This means that I'm capable of building community by facilitating the exchange of information between individuals and groups of people. The word community is defined as a group of people that share something in common. So what are some things that we can share to bring us closer together? First thing we can do is use design to share our cultures and experiences. The project that led me to this area of inquiry happened on March 3rd, 2018, when I cut out all of the images of people from the New York Times. I then put them back together into a newspaper format without the text. On this day, there were 45 images of white men. They were represented performing a wide range of activities like passing legislature, working the land, conducting orchestras, building walls, learning, fishing. Men of color were mostly shown playing sports or in conflict situations. When men and women were shown together, the woman was often looking towards a man. There were 10 images of women in the entire newspaper by themselves. Most of them were of Cynthia Nixon, and the rest were from the obituary section. Only 2 women of color were featured alone. This simple gesture shows us who's being left out of the conversation. This disparity between the stories being told in the media and my reality struck a familiar chord. I was born in Miami in 1984 to a family of recently arrived Cuban immigrants. From an early age, I noticed the difference between my life at home and what was represented on TV. In school, I learned about Greek mythology and the American Revolution, but nothing about Cuba. This made me feel ashamed of my culture because it didn't seem worthy of being taught in school. My experiences in the design industry as a Latinx female had a profound influence on my desire to radically expand the ways we practice and teach design. One way I expand my practice is to share aspects of my Cuban heritage through my work. This project is called Bolita, and now there's going to be a very loud video that's going to happen, just fair warning.
This is tonight's official Florida Lottery Cash 3 game for October 23rd, 1988. Supervised by Ray Brown with Lottery Security and Glenn Parnley of Pete Barwick. With tonight's 3 randomly selected Cash 3 machines, here's Pam Helton. Each machine has 10 balls 0 through 9. The drawing starts by mixing the balls in the first machine, next the balls in the second machine, and then the third machine. Now, here is tonight's first winning Cash 3 digit. 7. Tonight's second winning digit is 6. And the third and last digit is 0. So tonight's official Cash 3 winning number is 760. Join us again tomorrow for the next Cash 3 drawing, and this Saturday at 11 p.m. Eastern Time for Lotto.
Is anyone from Florida? No. Okay, did that give you major throwback? Okay. So for as long as I knew her, my grandmother watched the evening news to record the lottery numbers. This was one of the many notebooks she kept. You can see the dates written and the set of numbers right beneath them. When I first shared this notebook in class, it was brought to my attention that my grandmother was a bookie. realize that. I researched this behavior further and discovered that it wasn't just her. In Cuba, the lottery has a long history tracing back to the migration of workers from China in the 1800s. This is a lottery ticket from 1879, and this one is from 1919, not 1990. And this one is from 1952. Similar to Chinese numerology, Cubans assign a meaning to each number to help translate their dreams and daily situations into the numbers to play in the local lottery. The system is called La Charada or charade, and it is really common among Cubans. If you happen to know any older Cuban people, ask them, and they'll tell you what any number means between 1 and 100. Uh, for example, I turned 34 this year, and my dad was like, "You're a monkey." I'm like, "Cool. How do you just know that?" Um, I'll break the system down a little bit. So, for example, if you see a horse today, you should play the lottery and play the number one, and so you might win. Um, I was fascinated by this history, so I decided that I wanted to conduct more research by using the numbers and the words of La Charada as a guide. So, since number one means horse, I Googled Cuban horse and found this Wikipedia page. I then used that information to create a signature for a book, so like a page of a book. This one is for the number 16, and it is about how the Spanish brought bullfighting to Cuba in 1538. I then designed an interactive publishing game where the numbers you pick determine the pages that you get. So you pick a number, or three, is how I set it up. You grab the corresponding signature. So these are, I only got up until 20 because 100 would have been a lot of research. Maybe after I graduate, I'll have the time. Um, and and then you get these pages. So number 4 is cats. And in this page, if you Google Cuba and cats, you learn about Ernest Hemingway's cats that have 6 toes. This is a real thing. You can find them in Key West if you're interested. Number 7 is Seashell. And this page explains how the CIA tried assassinating Fidel Castro with an exploding seashell. Because he liked diving. Each page tells a fragment of Cuban history to represent how we learn about cultures through random bits and pieces of information. Admittedly, this system is complicated to explain. It was hard to make this project without the feedback of a Cuban person, but it was important for me to stay true to this custom. If we want to create from an authentic place, we have to feel comfortable sharing our cultures and also learning from things that aren't familiar. This is another project called Dominos, not a typo. This project is inspired by the game of dominoes. So show of hands, how many of you know how to properly play dominoes? Yeah, I find this very surprising. So many people I've met outside of Miami think that this is how you play dominoes or just this whole knocking down thing. But to me, dominoes has always looked like this. This is a place called Domino Park in the Little Havana neighborhood of Miami. This is also a common game that people play in Cuba. When Obama visited Cuba in 2016, he was invited to play dominoes on TV. And like he says, it's actually really easy to play. So I'll try to give you an overview. The object of the game is to get rid of all of your dominoes or have the smallest number when no one can go any further. So in the beginning, each player takes 10 tiles, and then the player with the highest numbered tile goes first. You know that because it's like the six by six. Sometimes there's suits that have more or less, so it varies. And then you match your tiles with the numbers on either end until you run out. So there's a little bit more to it than that, but you kind of get the idea. I wanted to create a large collaborative semi-permanent dominoes installation inspired by Studio Moniker's Dazzle Fungus series. So I created 55 9 by 17 inch sticker tiles made out of vinyl and 4 bags for the players to carry their tiles in. The numbers on the bags indicate the order for the players. Participants pick tiles at random, put them in their bags. Here's Rohan, player number 1, modeling. So to start, you peel the sticker off the back very carefully. It's pretty challenging, actually. and then you place it on the ground to match the sticker that came before it. So if there was a 6 and you have a 6, then you put those next to each other. Those who knew how to play taught those who didn't, and people worked together to install each piece. So this became like a big group event in a gallery. Uh, uh, Surprising finding is the dots also became part of the installation. They kind of took over the room. So there were dominoes and then the counter forms all over the place, which was really fun to remove, as you can imagine. Each player determined how their piece was placed, and that's something similar to dominoes. So you can kind of, you can put them wherever you want, and so people went nuts. They went up the walls, and eventually they took over the whole gallery space. It was so satisfying to introduce and share this aspect of my culture with my peers, and I wanted to create a space that encouraged students to do the same without the fear of being misunderstood. Being misunderstood. It was at this time that I discovered the perfect tool for experimentation. The Rezo. This generous, forgiving, rewarding machine is the perfect tool for testing out ideas with minimal risk and maximum reward. Do y'all have a Rezo here? Yeah, I fell in love at first print. And so I taught a pre-press and risograph printing workshop centered around home, culture, and generosity. These books contain the work designed by each of the students in the 3 sections. The assignments were simple. Design risograph prints that represent home and make enough to give a print to every person in the class. So Amanda Barrow made this postcard printed on black paper using the purple and the gold ink, which have a little bit more density than the other colors. And this was from a photo she took in Barbados, which is where she's from. Stephanie Wu designed these postcards highlighting her favorite restaurants in Boston's Chinatown. So this is just like a picture from Google Maps, and she hand wrote on top of it. And this is a photo of a friend of hers in one of the markets. And she drew on top of that as well. Molly Hastings explored the intersection of the tech industry and nature. She's from San Francisco, so this was part of her research, and you can tell there's like a shark eating the internet. Pretty cool. Corinne Ang from Manila decided to celebrate the sights and flavors of Manila, so that's spam, which made a lot of people hungry when she made it. And this is from a photograph that she took. She also created this booklet for her final project that perfectly embodies the spirit of culture, home, and generosity. To gather content, Corinne asked each student in the class to fill out a form listing recommendations from their hometown. She then took the handwriting and paired it with maps and images of the places that each person recommended. This one-of-a-kind booklet serves as both a guide and a record of the people who participated in the class. Encouraging students to explore the nuances of their experience and traditions yields meaningful and authentic work that has the power to educate and to build confidence. It was so satisfying to see this project because I really felt like I couldn't have imagined this project, and to watch someone else sort of take on your theory and make something of their own was a really incredible experience. The second thing I think we can do to build community is to make a design more accessible. Design services are out of reach for most people, not just financially, but logistically. If you don't know a graphic designer, then your options are limited to Fiverr or Kinko's. As a result, we've come to associate authenticity with things that are undesigned or standard or just templated. Most strip malls around the country have this type of signage. They don't subscribe to the rules of typography that we study in school, but they do get the message across to their intended audiences. Can this vernacular be used to bridge our ideological differences? The project is called Signs of the Times. So, I'll skip over. So, in the past 2 years, I've had many conversations about the radical changes people have made in their lives as a result of the 2016 election. I wanted to capture these changes as people voted in the midterm on November 7th, 2018. In order to retain the personal and informal nature of these conversations, I reached out to friends via text message and asked, this is verbatim what I texted, question for a project, how has your life changed as a result of the 2016 election? If so, can you share the first thing that comes to mind? As you can imagine, I didn't get a lot of responses. This is a very deep question to ask via text message unprompted, but I did get a few. And this is sort of how the interaction went with a friend of mine, Kira. She confessed that she's gained weight from stress-related eating, and she wishes she were joking. Um, and what I gathered from all of these responses was how relatable they were. I was like, "Yep, I mean, we all feel that way." But my challenge was, how do I wanted to put this content out in the world, these responses, but I wasn't really sure how to do so without, I guess, while remaining true to what was being said. And also, as a designer, it was difficult to think about what to do with this content. Do I design it with a beautiful typeface and make a poster? Is that really going to communicate to certain people? So my solution was actually to uh, print these on these signs that we see on the side of the road that we kind of almost ignore because they're just so prevalent and are usually advertising things like lawn services or selling houses. So I thought it would be interesting to print the responses on these signs using exactly the templates provided by the website signsonthecheap.com. They're not very cheap, actually, especially if you're printing like one or two of a kind. They're quite expensive, but um, I wanted to put these into this context because my hypothesis was that it would help people who did vote for Trump empathize with how their choices have affected others who did not. By printing these messages using the same materials and visual languages as election campaigns, landscaping, and people who buy houses, perhaps people will pay attention and relate to what is being said. I then put these signs up around Providence. People driving on the side of the road are like, "What?" And you just pass by. Same with this one. This is like a nice visual juxtaposition with the Western Union sign. This is the one we saw earlier. Some made for great selfie moments. As soon as I put this down, these folks walked by. They're like, "Yes!" And they posed, which was great. The sign probably got stolen shortly after, but I got this photo, so that's all that matters. I also purchased that phone number that is printed on these signs, and if you call it, you will be asked how your life has changed. Since posting them, I've only received one phone call, but it was this one. I live in fear that my rights as an LGBTQ person will be taken away at any moment. Someone out there saw one of these lawn signs and felt compelled to call this number and share such a deep and personal message. And to me, this means this project is a success. Although everyone might not have the time to call, I think it really, putting that text in this context connects with people because it is so unexpected. The next project is Hot Air, and it was a collaboration with Adam Chung, who is a graduate student in the ID department at RISD. Hot Air is an interactive sculpture that serves as a metaphor for the struggle for power and dominance within a conversation. So participants select a balloon and insert it into the small hole on either side of the box. With minimal instructions, they begin to inflate the balloon and instinctively begin to compete. Results vary, and the dialogue that occurs between participants brings awareness to the identity of each participant and how power dynamics are present during conversations. So this is what it looks like while people are playing, and then I'll show a quick video.
Got it. I started just because I want to. This could be good footage too.
Okay. Wait, hold on.
Yeah, it's super awkward. We didn't design this setup for comfort.
Okay. Okay, 1 second.
Oh my gosh, I love it. How did that feel?
It's really intense.
Yeah, right?
It was interesting because it was like, I was like stopping, like when you stopped, I was like, oh, I should like wait, and then I was like,
So we've done this a few times. Depending on who participates, the meaning for the viewer is likely to change. So if it's a man and a woman performing, you start to sort of imply like, of course the man is, taking up more air than the woman. And then when the balloon pops, it's also kind of weird because you don't know if you won or not. Like if your balloon pops, it's scary either way. As soon as you start blowing it up, you kind of lose sight of what the other person is doing. So your instinct is just to sort of keep going, and it gets bigger, and then you feel really uncomfortable. And then they pop, and do you win if your balloon didn't pop or if it did? And all of these things are sort of metaphors for conversation, right? If we're talking to someone and we're sort of, we're not really listening to the other person, and we're sort of overtaking. Do we win if we talk more, or do we win if we listen more? So this simple interaction sort of brings that to play in a really abstract but poignant way that's also fun and funny, depending on whether you're watching or participating. Um, and my final piece that I'll share today is called Bound Together. Um, this is a collaborative, this piece is a conditional design piece meant to be a collaboration between two participants. The responses, I'm gonna wing this one because my description isn't really helping. So I had two people sit across from each other on a table with these regular materials that were already sort of bound for spiral binding. And these are that's just regular graph paper and regular colored paper. I then had pens and markers in front of them, and I asked participants to answer the following questions. So here, I did this with two sets of participants. So I don't know if you all are familiar with the New York Times did a piece a few years ago about the 36 questions that help you fall in love with someone. So while these two people were sitting across from each other, I asked these questions aloud. These are some of the questions. So given the choice of anyone in the world, who would you want as a dinner guest? So when I asked that, the two participants began a conversation, and they also wrote down their responses on these papers. There really wasn't much direction, so people, and obviously these are designers, so they designed them or just wrote things. Some other questions are, what would constitute a perfect day for you? When was the last time you sang to yourself? The questions get increasingly personal. We only got until 8 in this run, but I imagine this can really extend. And then while answering the questions, both participants have to determine how to bind this book together. So here is a scan of one of the books. All the pages are different sizes, so it really becomes a design project, but also this sort of bonding experience. And I'm using the metaphor of binding to show that these two people are bound together. And also, this piece becomes this beautiful record of the dialogue between two people getting to know each other and potentially falling in love. And here, some responses were written in the participants' native language. Some were just scribbled on. It's sort of, I guess it really doesn't, that's not the important part. Yeah, this was the question, what do we have in common? They both like anime. And that required sort of discussing like, well, what do you like? So these beautiful pieces sort of become this interaction, but also this record. So in conclusion, I believe design has the ability to build community by helping us to better understand ourselves and each other. And this makes me excited for the future of our practice. So thank you.